All right, so I'm so excited to be here and being able to talk to everybody about this wonderful topic called breaking the bias and ending sexism in the workforce. And a topic that I think a lot feel very uncomfortable with. So we're gonna get rid of that today. We're gonna just say, you know what, bias is there, it happens, and it's okay. It's okay, right? Like we're gonna make this like, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to recognize it's happening. But I think what I want to go over today is really understanding what really it is. It's more of an informational session so that you can better identify it. So just to get started, if you can pull out your phones, we're going to make this interactive today. So I've got this little QR code, but if you go to slido.com as well and pull up break bias, it's the code word. And we're just gonna kind of do a pulse check on how is everybody feeling about this topic? Because I think sometimes people just don't show up because it's so uncomfortable, right? But what do they say in leadership? Get comfortable being uncomfortable, except for bias or sexism or diversity. Like it's just too uncomfortable, but we're gonna get rid of that. And so let's start putting some emojis in here. How are you feeling about it? How do you feel? Like nervous? Are you excited? Let's get to this. Let's see how everybody's feeling today. So we've got some hearts, some smiley faces. I love the inquisitive glasses, right? What are we gonna learn today? How's this gonna look? Looks like a lot of like, yes, let's talk about it. That's awesome. Let's see what else we get here. Bam, we got the fist bump. Let's do this. Super fun. Yeah, we've got some queens in there, some hearts. I think most of all, I love that it's coming back like, yes, let's talk about this. Let's get it out in the open. Let's just make it a topic that gets talked about and isn't like avoidant, right? We want to move away from that avoidance. We're getting some really fun ones in here. The curiosity, look, let's find out. There's so much more here, even for myself, there's more I'm learning every day on this topic. And so we're gonna really break it down, kind of go over high level. I wanna share a lot of examples because I think once you hear it, you start to recognize it. All right, very cool. Okay, so we're gonna use a few of these polls throughout the training. So this will be fun to use as we go forward. So, introduction, I'm going to introduce who I am, just so you know who's up here, why this is important to me. And then I'm going to be using a study that was done by, has everybody or anybody heard of Dr. Susan Madsen? Yes. She's like one of the leading experts, probably nationwide, but in Utah especially, does a lot of great work with an organization called the Utah Women in Leadership Project. And she did these briefs, and actually one of my co-founders of Tech Moms was the lead researcher on this. I've been watching what they've been doing for a couple of years in this area. And so we're gonna use that research, like real research on this to be able to have this conversation, just not Trina's experience, even though I'm gonna share some of those, because I've had a lot of fun experiences. But that's where the study's gonna come in. And then we're gonna break it down into the 4 areas that they identified of areas of sexism. So you hear sexism, you have kind of your own perspectives of what this is. And what was so enlightening for me as they created this research, they ended up doing, it was originally just sexist comments and responding, ended up with 4 briefs. There was that much variation in the types of sexism, and each one of those breaks down into like 4 to 10 different categories. So we're gonna go high level here, but those research briefs are incredible to read. They have a lot of detail on the types of comments. You can dig in a lot further if you want to expand a little bit more. But we're going to touch on some of those high level. So inequity and bias, we're going to start with that. Objectification, stereotypes, and then end with undervaluing women. But at the end of this, I'm not going to just leave you going, okay, I know what it is. I want to give some very specific actions that you can take to start driving in today's Women's Equality Day. Woo! So really excited to be talking about, well, what can I do about it, right? Because I don't want to walk away without actions. So let's start getting into it. This is just a little bit about me. The reason why this is important to me, I've been in the tech industry for 30 years and really got involved with diversity, equity, and inclusion, women's programs. I was the global president of Women in IT, overseeing 1,500 members in 22 countries in helping drive initiatives for women's equality. So I've been doing this for a long time. I speak a lot, do a lot of leadership, executive coaching, as well as just overall kind of create awareness within this space. At a core though, my core business is IT consulting. So I do this as like a side thing. I love it. I love these conversations. I love driving awareness, but I do IT consulting for sales, marketing, and service systems, so CRM systems. So your Salesforce, your HubSpots, those type of systems to help drive awareness. My background's in customer experience technology. So, and then on the side, I'm going to say the side, but it's really a core, founded an organization called Tech Moms, and we help women transition into the tech industry. By the end of the year, we'll have put over 300 women in these technology roles and transition them, primarily working at 4 different universities here in Utah. So all the way from Weber State, Salt Lake Community College, Mount Glen Tech, and UVU. Classes are starting in September, and I brought some info sheets if you guys know anyone that could benefit from our organization. So that's me. That's why I'm up here. That's why this is what I live and breathe, right? So let's take another poll. This one's helps me as I do these presentations. I like to be able to understand what is most important to you in your organization right now. Is it hiring women? Is it retaining? Is it that belonging? Is it equity? Like there's so much in this space, we can get really overwhelmed, right? And understanding how do we put initiatives together in our organization. And so really trying to understand what is most important within this area so that we can kind of maybe tailor today's presentation to your needs. And so if you go to your poll again, it's going to just have you pick 3. What do you think are the top 3 for you that are most important? All right, engagement and promotion. A lot of the topics today are going to help that if the more awareness of these, the more engaged someone is going to feel if they feel like they can speak up. And we're going to talk about that because responding to sexism is really, it's really damn hard. It's really hard, right? But having an organization that is open enough to say, hey, I know this exists. Can you please pull me to the side if I did something, right? That's going to help with engagement. Promotion and how do we deal with that? So we're gonna dig into that. I'm glad that really helps me because I know those are some of the key things that we want to talk to today. Okay, mentoring and sponsorships and equitable career pathing. Very good. Nice. All right, so this presentation, I've done this a few times. This year's theme for women, the Women's Break the Bias is really focused on imagining a gender equal world. Can we get there? What needs to happen and why is this still a thing, right? And how deep does it run? So the goal here is a world free of bias, of stereotypes, of discrimination, that's diverse, equitable, and inclusive, where difference is valued. I think that's a really important thing is that recognizing this is a value, not only to you as a human being, but to your organizations. And this is why organizations are investing time into this is because it drives growth and profitability. So, understanding it is a nice thing to do, but we're going to talk about a little bit why it is really such a topic of importance for a lot of corporations right now. Okay, so this is a quiz. You don't have to put your name. You can make up Mickey Mouse or something else if you're wanting to stay anonymous. But I got a little quiz for you. A little fun quiz just to see kind of what we think the benefits of having women in the workforce are. Do we need to have that conversation? Yes, we do. So there are a lot of benefits for having these conversations, to become aware, to breaking our own biases, right? All right, we got Bart's shoes and Jane Doe. That's all good. We're all good. Okay, we're all getting in there. Okay. I'll move over to it, but once you get in, there's 5 questions. Pick the 3 that you see are organizational benefits of having women in, I hear technical roles, but overall, it doesn't have to be technical. What is the benefit of women in the organization? Pick the 3 you think. Just while we're reading, we've got provide a more balanced view of female gender and technology sector issues. We become more in tune with our feelings. Facilitate better problem solving abilities, have people do all busy work or increase performance. All right, we've got about 2, 1. All right, I put a timer on there, so here's what we get. Okay, the top 3 are correct. We get a more balanced view of female and gender tech. Not, and like I said, I do a lot of tech, so that's why it has tech in there, but in general. But guess who our market is? It's women and men. And so usually you get a higher balance and view of your markets. That's what drives growth and profitability in a company, right? So you can understand the challenges that are there from a more diverse perspective. That's why you get higher innovation and creativity and higher growth as a company. All right, number 2, we become more in tune with our feelings. This is a really common response. This is a bias, right? So a lot of time in my 30-year career in technology, I would get a lot of comments and things about women and their emotions, and they're very in tune to their feelings. Well, anger is a feeling. And I can tell you, I dealt with anger within the work environment a lot. And it's an emotion, just maybe we respond differently in using our emotions. So just understanding that this assumption that women are more in tune to their feelings is a bias. It's not necessarily always true, but it is perception, right? Better problem solving abilities. There is research showing that the more diverse teams you have, the better ability to solve problems, because you're bringing different perspectives forward, right? Have people do the busy work. I do get answers on that sometimes. That's another bias that I do have there. There's this thing called office housework that a lot of women can get caught up in, and always being handed the busy work that's not really going to help them get forward in their career, but consumes a lot of their time. I had a friend of mine who is an executive at a bank. She reports into the CEO of a major bank. And she's like, every time we finish a meeting, they ask me to take the notes and send them out. Right? So she's like, how do I deal with this? And I'm like, well, just say, hey, Joe, hey, why don't you take it this time, and then we'll round robin it to the team. Right? Just, there's these little assumptions that these type of tasks might be more appropriate for a woman to do. So just be aware of some of those, and then increased performance, absolutely. We've talked a little bit about that. So good job, everybody. All right. Congratulations, Jane Doe. Jane Doe. No, there's a lot, everybody. This wasn't just Jane, just put her at the top. I think she was the first. Okay, so why? Before I get into all of the heavy part of this, let's understand why this is important. This is important because it's not just about treating humans equally. It's helpful to know that it makes economic sense, okay? So really getting in tune with our own biases, being aware of those is going to create better economic sense, both within our corporate environment and in our overall society. So gender equality and human development, higher income per capita, faster economic growth, and competing. This is taken at like a national level, right? But even for your companies, if you think about it, If your organization is able to attract women into the workforce and they want to stay there, isn't that a competitive advantage? I can tell you the women I work with at Tech Moms, they look at the companies and they say, is this going to be an environment I want to work in? Right now, you can't afford to be in an environment that people don't want to work in. So, keep that in mind. I had the opportunity to go to Africa. I know I'm going to take you all the way to Africa. I don't know why I had to go all the way there to be able to figure out this. But I've been doing a leadership development by partnering with the Global Hunger Project. And eBay sent us to Senegal, Africa, to be able to learn leadership, like how do you create real strong communities that can create change, right? Amazing experience. I could go on forever and ever. But in working with them, the key that the CEO of the Global Hunger Project would talk about is that everybody a leader, right? You ever heard that? Like, how do we get everybody to act and think like a leader? That we can create change. It's not just a title. Everybody, we want all minds to create change, right? And in order to transition like 10 to 15,000 people to be able to overcome poverty and become self-reliant, I mean, that's a massive thing. Their goal is to end poverty by 2030, right? Globally, that's their goal. Well, how do they do that? Number one, you have to have women at the table. You have to have women involved in decision-making. If you don't have that, it's not gonna happen. And you're working in, a lot of these environments are very heavy, male-focused in leadership. And I remember sitting down with the chief of one of the villages, and we're like on these colored mats, and we're all just sitting under the shade of this tree out in the middle of nowhere, like, sands of Senegal. And the CEO of the Global Hunger Project asks, so what was it like to first have women involved in decision making? What's that like? And he says, at first we were really scared. We thought we were going to lose our power. And I was like, oh, what do you mean you're going to lose your power? Like, that's my internal like, what do you, And I kind of had to like watch my own reaction. And he continued, he's like, but what we found was that things actually got a lot easier. Like, a lot of the women really knew about healthcare. They knew about education. They knew how to solve these problems that we hadn't been able to figure out how to solve. And so I think understanding that importance of diverse thought in solving major problems is so critical. So critical. And that's why I say, I don't know, I had to go all the way there, but it's like, we got the same problem here. It's not just in Africa, it's everywhere. Like, why do we not see this opportunity, right? This is an opportunity. So, inequity is everyone's issue. Right now, and especially this number's gotten larger this last 2 years because of the pandemic. We had so many women leave the workforce, right? So it used to be, I think, around 110, 112 years, which is still a really long time. It's now 135 years before we'll see that the inequity is overcome at the current pace. So that's why I'm out here speaking, because that is beyond, I'm gonna be dead. Like, I wanna see it in my lifetime, right? I wanna see that this changes now. And the more conversations we have, the more people we get involved, and it takes everyone. It takes everyone stepping back, recognizing their bias, and saying, okay, here's what we need to do. All right, so keep that in mind as we move this forward. All right, so we're going to talk about leadership now, because like I said, everyone's a leader. So what traits, this is going to be a little word cloud, what traits do you think of, and you can put in more than one if you like, that describe a great leader? Service, I love that. Compassion, empathy, integrity, a listener, empathy. Empathy comes up a lot lately, especially post-COVID. Humility, sincerity, cheerleader. I love that one. I always like to say as a leader, you can be on the team, a coach, or a cheerleader. Like you can play all those roles, right? I love that one. Determination, servant, vulnerable, empathetic, advocate. That empathy and compassion, look at how big those ones are coming up. I think this one, you know, if we would have done this maybe 2 years ago, do we think we would have had these same words up here? There's a shift happening, isn't there? There's a big shift happening, and it's been really interesting to see this within leadership. What does leadership really mean? I'll do an exercise sometimes when I'm speaking to like youth groups or others and say, okay, when I first said the word leader, what image came to your mind? Most often the response was white male in a suit jacket. All right? Even for me, like it's like ingrained in our brains, right, of what is a leader. And so it's breaking that. When we say break the bias, it's those type of things that are preventing us from being able to, oh, what is a leader? What does a leader look like? It might be a 12-year-old young girl. It might be it could be anybody, but it's so ingrained into us.
Good question.
Yes.
Have you ever done this exercise basically with a room full of male leaders and noticed if there's a shift in terms of what they're focusing on?
I haven't, but I've done a lot of leadership, like executive coaching, and I think that there's a slight difference, and I am seeing a change when we talk about what it is to be a leader now, and then trying to get grasp of like this pressure of like, I've got to be different than who I was, and what is that, and how do I, make this shift? I think there's work that's still in progress to be able to work through that. Yeah. Good question. Right. Okay. Another interesting just insight that I saw recently was in a sales report, because I do so much work in sales, marketing, and service systems, and what is Salesforce? The same thing shows up on what it is to be a good salesperson. It's about relationships, it's about empathy, right? It's like this shift is happening in a lot of aspects in multiple industries. So the question I would have for you today is, what kind of leader do you want to be? And like we were saying, you're going to get uncomfortable today. It's just part of the work. It is, and it's okay. It's okay. Like I said, if you're having emotions or feelings, because some of these things can be triggering. Like even for me, as I do this work and I'm coaching people, I sometimes have to like take a step back. Okay, all right, now move forward, right? And just being patient with ourselves, but really recognizing what type of leader and how do I want to view myself, and what work am I willing to do to be that type of leader we just talked about. Empathetic, compassionate, all of these things required to be able to lead, engage, promote, retain diverse workforces. Okay. So I mentioned this project a little bit more. We're going to get into the details now. Just doing that here. So the Utah Women in Leadership Project, that's the link. I'll give a number at the end if you want this presentation or the information, or connect with me on my mailing list. I'm also send a link for where all the research is. So I'll give you that number at the end. You can text, I'll send it out. But in this survey, there was just over 1,115 respondents. 839 women participated with usable data. There was 1,750 census comments. So as I go through this, we're going to do a little fun exercise too. We've got kind of the polling check-ins, but in the chat of the Zoom, one thing that I like to do is, if anybody has felt this or heard, like if I mentioned something, you're like, oh, it triggered a memory or something that I had, put a Y in the chat of the Zoom. Because one of the things that I hear sometimes is like, oh, sexism doesn't happen anymore. I don't know where that's coming from, because it does, and probably more frequently than you're aware of. So I think it helps drive awareness that it is still happening and gives voice to those that are dealing with it at times. So if you ever kind of have that thought or have seen it or recognized it, just put a Y, right? That's it. So we talked about the 4 key themes. So bias, objectification, stereotypes, and undervaluing women. I forgot I had my little handy trigger here. So we're going to talk first, before I dig into those 4, about recognizing and responding. So it's going to create awareness and the impacts in the workplace, right? But it's aimed to create change. We want to create change with this. So there's 2 things I would ask. First, seek to understand. If I say something and you're like having a reaction, just stay open-minded and try and care. A lot of times I'll get immediate responses and shut down on some of the things that are said, like, oh, well, they're just being a victim, like really harsh, right? Just to totally discourage somebody else's experience, just like that. So stay open-minded, and be the power for change. Start to create awareness for yourself and others.
I'm gonna pause it real fast. Have them use the Q&A, not the chat.
Okay, just to clarify, if you're putting something in, use the Q&A, not the chat on the Zoom. So if you've heard something, Q&A. And also in the poll that I have, if you have any questions as we go along, you can add any questions in the Slido poll as well. Great, good call out. So the goal here is we're going to become more aware, because the more awareness we have, we can't go back. We can choose to interrupt, be intentional, and create change, right? That's the goal. All right, so let's talk about what happens for a woman when they're dealing with sexism. And I'm going to give an example I had that was recent and when I still get caught off guard. So I was in an event and my friend was introducing to somebody that's a VC funder. And I walk up and he introduces me, and I hadn't even shared my name. And the first thing he said was, yeah, you're too bossy. I'm like, right, you didn't even know my name. And I got really defensive. I'll be honest, like, I've been doing this for how many years, and I still get so caught off guard, and I was like, I'm not too bossy. Like, so I come off ticked off, right? Because I'm like, what the heck? And I'm like, I'm being punked right now. Like, does he know who I am and what I do? like, so where's the camera, right? Am I being caught? But it happens. And he went immediately on his phone, wouldn't talk to me again. I think it just kind of came out, and he didn't know what to do about it, and then just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna just ignore that just happened and ignore her because I don't know how to respond. Well, interestingly enough, 3 months later, I had another individual say, hey, you should meet so-and-so. It happens to be this person. I'm like, well, this should be interesting. So I went to his office. He doesn't remember doing it at all, or he hid it really well. I'm not sure. But I think that this thing we hear unconscious bias, sometimes it just comes out. It's just like, right? And it can catch us. But I think the more aware we are through some of this, we can go, oh, that was really stupid, right? I am so sorry. I don't know where that came from. You know, and just catch it in the moment and being able to say something. And it also opens up the other individual saying, okay, thanks for recognizing me as a human being, right? Like, it just changes things if you can catch it, because it's gonna happen. But it's that awareness piece. So there's multiple ways that women deal with this. First is, it might be my direct response. I'm not too bossy. What are you talking like? Or, and I'm not saying we all respond the right way, or no response, and you internalize it. You can see that emotional response, all of these sometimes are combined. I think I did all of these, right? Except for the legal action, which is happening more often. And another reason, I don't want that to be the driver for change, but be aware that the more awareness around this area, there are discrimination is grounds for legal action. So just know it's really hard for women to process this when it's happening and in the moment. And most of my career, I did not know how to deal with it, like still to this day, right? It's taking it, and it takes a moment to kind of process it and then go, okay, I can say something. And so creating a corporate environment here where, you know, after the fact, you can have an open door policy and be able to put that out there and say, hey, if I do something, will you please come tell me? In a private interaction, right? So that it can be addressed. That's where we want to get to, is that people feel comfortable and be able to say, this bothered me, this is why. It's okay to have that conversation, okay? All right, so let's dig in.
Question. So I was just thinking about that scenario, right? And if being me, if I were to witness something like that,
Yes.
and I want to do the right thing,
Yeah.
right? Would it be, I guess, I'm trying to think through a scenario if I witnessed someone saying something to a woman that was inappropriate, or is it, I'm just trying to think through the correct
Say
way.
something. This is I wish more than anything that it wasn't always just put on me
Right.
to have to respond, because it's exhausting. It's exhausting to deal with, and it puts me in the bad light. But if it comes from an ally, that's what we're gonna talk about, allyship. That is being an ally and saying, hey, I don't think that was really appropriate. I think you should be respectful to my friend, right? Like my other friend didn't know how to deal with it either. And he was like, okay, that was really weird. And I talked to him about it later and had a conversation about it. But I think in the moment, just saying, hey, time out. Corinne Clark, I don't know if anybody knows her, but she had spoke once and said, sometimes in a meeting, I'll just go, hey, time out. We need to address what was just said, right? Like pause, let's not just pass by this uncomfortable thing that's out there. Let's, okay, do we need to parking lot this? Because this, you know, just there's ways to be able to do it in a non-confrontational way. Sometimes it might be in the moment, sometimes it might be after a meeting. There's multiple ways, but I would say don't ever just not do anything. Because if you felt uncomfortable, you know other people were probably feeling uncomfortable, and the individual that was maybe targeted. Interrupting is a big one. That's really easy to go, hey, I think so-and-so is speaking. Like the interrupting is one that I've dealt with a lot. Great question, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna dig in. I'm gonna do, we got about 20 minutes to go through about 4 of these and then kind of some actions, okay? So inequity and bias, there's 4 different areas for dealing with or understanding what this is. So unconscious bias is the example I talked about. It's just these assumptions of what your role is. Stereotypes, beliefs regarding certain groups of people that individuals hold without being consciously aware. So that too bossy, too aggressive, too anything. Anytime you hear the word you're too something, what's happening is you're comparing yourself, comparing this person to the image of what you expect them to be in your mind. And so use that as a red flag. I hear too all the time, like too much of something, like they have an idea of how I should be and act, therefore that's a bias. And so I'm listening for it now, and it can be like responding to it could be, do you understand that's a potential bias? You know, too bossy, some of these things, so just listen for that. Those are kind of just red flags. Gender inequity, in which women are treated differently and disadvantaged in society because of their gender. This one, Lieutenant Henderson, she had done a presentation with Dr. Matson, and she was talking about this, and they had another one in here that I want to read. Some of these I want to read because I don't want to get them wrong. So this is an example. When I ran for public office, there was a different question asked to me and my opponent. I got the question about how I will balance work and family. He got the question about his qualifications, right? It's just the you're supposed to be focusing on your family. How are you going to deal with your family? Are you going to be able to, you know, do this job because your family? Like, right? And that leads into stereotypes as well. Too crisp, I love the story on that one too. Been told I didn't get a promotion because I'm too crisp, right? Yeah, I had somebody come back 14 years later and apologize to me because they knew that I was qualified and said, I always regretted not getting that promotion and not being sent. So don't wait 14 years, deal with it in the moment, right? Okay. Some of it can be systemic policies and stuff that are impacted. Like I file my taxes separately for all the work I do, and my refund check was mailed to my husband. So there's systemic issues that are in place too, just, you know, that are just built into our assumptions that all the money goes through the man. Like, hello, I exist. All right, okay, so defensiveness, backlash against feminism. This one is one to be really aware of. If anybody's feeling like anger and like, oh, this and that, like, check it. Tune in, understand that there's a lot of defensive, like, what is a feminist? Oh, they're too feminine. Like, this is just saying we want to be treated equal. Feminism is okay. There's no need to be angry. Gender pay, promotion, hiring, inequity. And each one of these, we could spend like a whole other day, right? Just on some of the details behind it. But I want to kind of do the overview, just so you understand the scope of what's happening here. But a lot of these could be comments that demonstrate women are discriminated against in various aspects. One that I heard multiple times, and even hearing from my tech moms now, you didn't get that promotion because he has a family to support. Somehow, my kids are of less value than his kids. Even though I'm qualified, that was the decision criteria. That really happened multiple times. And some of my tech moms are coming to me with that one just this year. Crazy. Okay, so we're gonna do a check-in. All right, this is the breather moment. Okay, all right, we went through those ones. I don't see it. I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing great. Like, this isn't a thing. I learned something new. I'm excited to be intentional in changing behavior. I'm overwhelmed, which is okay, but I'm open. I'm completely lost. What does this mean to me? Right? So, great. We're all learning something. We're all learning something. This is wonderful. Okay. Objectification. This one is a really hard one as well, right? Sex in the workplace is not something people want to talk about, but we're going to. Okay. So objectification is really focusing on appearance. So this could be talking about your looks, what you're supposed to look like, your bodies, how you present yourself, what I'm supposed to look like when I present myself. Sexual harassment. Like I said, I share my experiences. I've been at conferences and had somebody attack me in an elevator at a work conference. So it's there. I'm not going to dismiss it, right? So sexualizing women, unwanted sexual advances, intersectional discrimination. This could be race, age, body type, weight. It's not just female, but all the things that come in, understanding that there's multiple cross sections that impact on the objectification side. Exclusion from workplace activities. I had this happen quite a few times. I was traveling to Ireland, and my very close friend and boss says to me, "Hey Trina, we're gonna go golfing, why don't you go shopping?" So the whole team went golfing, and I was excluded. I have lots of those. So be careful about when they talk about inclusive workforces, this one because of your gender. Another one that is I do executive leadership coaching, excluding women from travel for the assumption something might happen, right? Well, that one is one that need to be aware of. Like if that's the reason why somebody's being excluded from doing corporate travel, then you need to be able to address that because it's defeating their ability to grow and move up in their career. And then accusations of using sex to get ahead. Hurtful, right? That, you know, the Me Too movement was wonderful. It also created a big backlash for people avoiding being around women in some cases. We gotta check, like I said, check it. Try and figure out, am I excluding people? What are those reasons? How do I make sure that objectification, some of these things aren't the reason why women are included in travel or in team meetings or in one-on-ones, team lunches, on one-on-ones. Those are all prohibited for their ability to advance in the workplace. Okay? All right. I'm gonna move on to the next one. We're gonna do a check. That one's a hard one, I think, that's a hard one. I can give a lot more examples, but I know we're gonna be running out on time. So, like I said, you can always go to the research brief. So, not concerned about it, we're all good. Learn something, overwhelmed but aware and open, or what was that? I dozed off. Hopefully I haven't made anybody go to sleep out there. Hopefully we're still engaged here. So I did have, it's kind of funny because I did this at another conference and there were people sleeping when I actually put this up. So it was kind of funny. I was like, caught ya. All right, looks good. Looks like we're moving forward. We want to make sure that this is not an issue in your workplace. Fabulous. All right, stereotypes. All right, general stereotypes. This again goes to that to or should. You should be home with your kids. You should be focused on your family first. You should what, right? To and should, trigger words. So, the assumption of what a role is for a woman can really catch us. And so you have, we should prioritize homemaker roles. And that if I haven't, I had this a lot because I had an amazing career and I would get say things, well, I'm sorry you have to work. I'm like, what are you talking about? I freaking, what? I'm doing awesome. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, and by the way, I'm a rock star mom too. Right? Like that assumption of like, oh, I'm like designing systems for millions of people across the world. I don't know what you're talking about. I get to do really cool stuff. But our own internalized sexism, that came from a woman, right? It's not always men, it's women. And I heard something about today. I went to Design Bank breakfast and heard a couple of speakers. And Jennifer Smith, who's the CTO for Design Bank, was talking about how we can be better collaborators and not competitors. Okay, so there's those forms of sexism too, and we need to be aware of that's impacting all of our growth. If we're in a competitive, and where that comes from, I just want to hit on this. A lot of that comes from because there are so few roles, they think that there's not enough space for everybody. It is that scarcity mentality. There's only so many women that are going to be put into leadership, so therefore I have to fight. Don't create that type of environment, right? Where you feel like there's only so much room. Motherhood penalty and benevolent sexism. We were talking about this one a little bit. What is this? So benevolent sexism comes across like you're being kind, but it's sexist. So an example I had of this is I would show up to a work meeting and the traffic was really bad. And I would walk into the room and like, oh, Trina, you dealing with your kids again? Do we need to make adjustments? So it sounded like they were trying to be nice. But in a room full of 50 people, it started saying you can't do your job because you're always taking care of your kids. So watch out, it sometimes comes across skewed, right? Okay. Double bind, double standard, this is dealing with, it's like the or, I call it the or, and that's a lot of reasons why women left the workforce. Either I'm a good mom, or I'm good in the workplace. It's an and, we can do both. Women can do a lot of incredible things. I had a friend of mine that was pitching for a business competition, and they said, well, are you really gonna be able to run your business being a single mom? Nobody else gets asked that question, but because, right? But so you're kind of like this double standard on what you can be, and what our limits are as mothers, as women. So understanding that. Okay. All right, we're gonna move along here. Quick check-in. And it's okay if anybody is feeling stressed or angry, right? We wanna make it all okay. We're gonna recognize those emotions. We're gonna work through them. Take a breather. Say, okay. All right, it looks like we're gonna apply some changes. That's awesome. All right, undervaluing women. This one is the belief that women are less capable, intelligent, or less confident than men solely due to their gender. This comes across usually in your pay and promotion equity, where you're going to see it within your departments. If you're comparing people, you're going to assume that the woman is less capable than the man. So when I went to school, I went back to Harvard and did business strategy. And I went to talk, I was the global president of Women in IT, so I was talking to the professor about the work I wanted to do to create strategies for my organization. And she's like, I'm so glad you're doing this. She's like, every time I come to class and I walk up, this is more of a stereotype, but she's like, I walk in, the students will ask me to go get them coffee or papers. And she'll be like, I'm your professor. So it's some of that, but she did this study, they were talking about they did how they do the Utah business case, or Utah, sorry, I'm used to saying Utah. The Harvard business case, you go to business school and you do these studies of a business and what they did right, what they did wrong. They did one and they took the same, it was a woman CEO, ran a company, did this amazing turnaround for this company. And they took it and changed it to a man's name and then put all male, gender form on it. They then had the students respond in these two cases. Guess what they said on the woman? Too aggressive, too bossy, she shouldn't have this, she shouldn't have that, she could have done better. Guess what they said on the men? Great leadership, really, just drove hard, super strong, great leader, really turned around. It was her thing, but just the gender form. So that catches this same type of perceptions that we get when we're reviewing applications, when we're looking at hiring, when we're interviewing. There's a lot of things you could do within that space to really even this field because bias comes in and this is what's getting us, is the undervaluing a woman and their contributions. Infantilizing, condescending, right? Like talking down, oh, we're gonna be able to do this. Feeling like you need to take care of them is common. Assumed incompetence, language and terms, and then the affirmative action. Well, you were hired because they had to, you were a quota, right? Like so like I said, I'm like breezing over, right? There's a lot here, a lot you can dig in on your own. These research briefs are a great way to get started here. Okay. So last check. Okay, I'm like just pouring it on you, I know, but just kind of check in. How are we feeling? Looks good. We're getting set, and this is good. Like we feel like we're treating as equals. We're trying to create change, but I feel like we're doing a good job, and that's great. Like really recognizing, are we taking initiatives and creating change that drives being able to put things in place from a policy perspective and practice perspective that help interfere these biases from being able to be in the workforce, right? So that's awesome. Okay, so I know we're coming up on time, but I do want to hit on what can I do? Okay.
We can go to 12:15.
Oh, we can. Okay. Well, good. So we'll spend some time here, and that will leave me time for Q&A. Okay. So we'll go to 12:15. So by failing to promote and retain women in technical roles in their early stage careers, that was another thing that came up this morning in the work of Zions Bank was really focused on early entry career growth because that's where a lot of fallout happens on retaining women in the workforce and then moving them into leadership. So it affects women's lives, their livelihood, their long-term growth, a lot of cultural consequences by women falling out of the workforce too early. And so companies where women were well represented at the top earn up to 50% higher profits and share performance. So it's great from a corporate perspective, it's great for a cultural society perspective. Let's make it happen, right? Like, let's work through these hard topics to be able to say, okay, how do we get more women in leadership? This is why we're doing it. Does everybody understand the value? How do we get there, right? Have those conversations. Okay, so these are a couple of suggestions I found. There's a lot of things you can do, but I want to give kind of some examples. So to be able to recruit, retain, and promote talent equally, be very clear on your expectations. Be results focused. What are we trying to achieve? And you don't just do that once the person's hired. Put it in your job descriptions. Put it in, like, what is it that we want this role to do and accomplish? What are our goals within this organization? How does that all tie together? I would say the number one thing for being able to hire, retain, and promote, clear on results-focused targets. Move away from task lists of, well, did you do this, 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 and this task? Well, no, what did you help contribute from our overall corporate objectives? It's really hard to say, well, you didn't do this, so therefore you didn't get that promotion. If you're focused on results, it does two things. It helps you get to achieve your results, but it also takes some of that bias out of the promotional cycle. Takes some of the bias out of it sets clear expectations as you're hiring on what you want this role in this individual. It helps put them on target as well, okay? So lay out the criteria you can consider for promotion if you achieve these results, right? So, and it's, as a leader, it's a little bit more challenging to get out of the tactical list of things that need to get done and really focus what are our goals and what do we need to get to. And then it makes broader, better conversations anyway. I'm like, well, did we think about doing this? And how about we do other things? You know, like, there's a lot of wins in that one. Emphasis on attaining additional skills. What additional certifications can I do? What additional career paths are available to me? What other roles might be available? There's a power in what I call the tap on the shoulder. For a lot of women, including myself, tapping on somebody's shoulder and saying, hey, you'd be great at this. Have you ever thought about doing this? And I go, oh, yeah, I have never done that. What do I need to do? And then enable them to do it. And because we may not have had that thought ever put in our head, but I can tell you when we tap on the shoulder and say, hey, you'd be really good at tech. Have you ever thought about data science? Have you ever thought about, that's what I do with women all day long. And they go, oh yeah, and it puts them on a path and they just go do it, and it's amazing. And so try to think about within your teams, what additional trajectories that person might be able to do and help them get there. Routine career discussions. Let your teams own their career. This isn't up to the leader. This is up to every individual to be able to spend the time and say, what is my career aspirations? What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Have those one-on-ones, have those conversations consistently. I used to do this with my teams at least quarterly. We have one-on-ones weekly. We have our check-ins as a team. Career every quarter. How are we doing on it? What skills? What's your next step? Where do you want to go? How do I enable that? And then we talked, this came up in the beginning, that's why I do that check on what do we want to talk about? Mentorship and sponsorship. Sometimes these two things get confused. What's a mentor versus a sponsor? Mentor is somebody that can go to say, hey, I'm dealing with this situation. How can I go over it? What's a good career? Kind of help mentor. A sponsor is a vocal advocate for an individual in the organization. They are speaking up on somebody's behalf. They're like, hey, have you heard about Jane Doe? She's doing some awesome stuff. Let's maybe enable her from some skills and some extra projects so she can move into this next position. That's a sponsor, okay? It's very different. In a lot of organizations, I know the ones I've worked in, we had what I like to call a promotion battle, where all the leaders get together and they battle over their team and who should get promoted. I don't know how Thomas Arts is set up, but I think it's a common practice. It's whoever can be the best cheerleader to be able to say, who on my team, are we cheerleading everyone? How do we do that and making sure everybody's getting opportunity? And then open bias discussions. We've talked about this a lot. We gotta create those channels for feedback and being able to speak up and being able to call out when it's happening. All right. And then being an ally. So this is kind of my final one here, and then I'll open it up for questions. So developmental relationships, skill up, how do we create those career paths? HR processes, like we said, sometimes we can't overcome all biases. We need to create interruptions in our HR practices that make sure bias isn't being introduced. So there's a lot you can do there. ATS systems, one I deal with at Tech Moms quite often is we'll have a policy rule in their ATS system that says if there's any break in somebody's experience, then they don't make it through. Well, I've got Tech Moms returning to work. Majority of women at some point are gonna return to work or are working through that, right? They stopped, they paused, they came back, guess what? They can't get back in the door. We've shut the door. And so I will call the CEO of the company, I don't call the HR department, I will call the CEO and say, do you realize I can't get women in your company because you have this rule? And they're going in a black hole. And I'm like, I'm done with it. Like, we're not doing this anymore. So I've been having those conversations quite often and saying, why are they not making it in? And do we have policies that are creating that, right? Okay. Leadership development, how do we create like those leadership pathways, those career paths, recognition for work and making sure it's equitable and that there is the recognition. Treating women as equals, this comes up like in our meetings, like you were saying, how do I speak up on somebody's behalf? If you hear it, they'll be like, I don't know, you know, let's let so-and-so, like watch for those interruptions, watch for that language, right, that's coming up maybe. And call out for bias on their behalf. That is such a relief. If you want an engaged workforce, you have somebody that spoke up on your behalf, I'm gonna be sticking around, right? I don't wanna go somewhere else where I'm gonna have to restart. But if I'm in an environment where somebody's gonna speak up for me, it's a known thing, it's a known issue, I'm gonna be engaged, I'm gonna wanna stay. It creates retention. One of the things that I had a great VP that he required 50% of all candidate pools had to be women. It was mandatory. If he didn't see that there was 50% candidates, guess what? My rec got pulled. That's not a place you want to be as a manager, having your recs get pulled because you're not able to. And it's part of the reason why I started Tech Moms is because I got tired of the response of, you know what, well, women just don't go into tech, they don't exist. I'm like, you want to bet? I'll go create them. So I started creating pipelines with more women into tech. Just make sure that women are in the promo pool. If you don't know where to go, if you need to build your network, reach out. I can help with that. And just start looking for opportunities where these diverse teams and experiences can be created and enabled. So that's it. That's a whirlwind right there, right? It's a lot. But just the question is, are you in? And saying it's work, but it's necessary work, and it's sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes can be difficult, but it's worth it. It's worth it. So the ask is just, will you help break the bias? That's what I've got for today. So we'll turn it over for questions now. What do we got? Yes.
So with the rise of social media becoming so prevalent in everyone's lives,
yeah,
we're starting to see a lot of micro celebrities. One that comes to mind is the guy who recently got banned from everything, Andrew Tate, who are kind of actively perpetuating a lot of misogynistic and anti-women, equality kind of stereotypes to a lot of young men. How detrimental do you think that will be to the future of, wanting equality among everyone? These micro celebrities kind of actively hating on women, actively hating on minorities.
Don't give them a voice, right? Don't watch them. There's a polarizing everywhere. Like everywhere I look, it doesn't seem like everything is so polarized. We're doing all this great work for women's equality, and you've got the polar, misogynistic thing happen. If they have a voice, that's gonna attract more focus on it, right? Don't give them a voice. And we can't change all of it, but we can focus where people are listening. That's what I choose to do. Because I still see and hear it all the time, but I'm not gonna put focus or attention on it. I'm gonna focus to the people that are willing to listen, willing to get engaged, and willing to create change. And if I can give them and amplify that voice more, that's how it wins. Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for that. What else?
Do you think this session or like the general topics are different in Utah versus any other states?
Yes. Yes, there's an additional layer of work in Utah than when I go out of state, right? There's an additional layer of stereotypes, especially on what a woman's role is and where she belongs, it takes extra effort to remove that perception. And I think the more I have those conversations, I'm seeing people, oh, okay, but there is extra work here in Utah, specifically in that area.
So I missed some here.
That's all good.
So we already covered this, there is the dilemma of being able to actively recruit and hire women and to have more representation and equity within. But is there much discussion about essentially screening the male candidates or maybe even female candidates for bias before they're coming in,
Great question.
to ensure that you're creating a culture that's perpetuating itself, and you're trying to hire into it. It's not, it's kind of working against itself.
I'll give you one tip that's I see work really well is in your job description, put your expectations of what this candidate brings to your culture and that you accept and want more women. We support the LGBTQ community, whatever your language is that says this is the culture we're creating, and the individual that gets hired here is expected to align to what we are presenting as our culture. Putting it in your job description. I did this when I was hiring, a year ago, I was doing some hiring and I put at the very beginning, this is the type of company, this is the results I'm focusing on, this is the type of culture and what's important to me. I had so many applicants. I was like, whoa, like, and it's because people are seeking that. They want those type of companies, right? That will enable that.
We have a queue of online questions, so
Great.
if that's
Yeah,
okay,
let's
I'm
do
gonna start queuing them up. Kate, you are up first. If you wanna unmute, you can go ahead and.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for this. It all resonates so much. I actually had an experience where a coworker said to me that he believed a woman in leadership at the company was only chosen because she's a woman, and he felt really sure about that and explained that he didn't feel she was qualified for any other reason. And I felt really uncomfortable, and I kind of spoke back to him and said, you know, what that sounds like to me. And I also brought up how difficult it is within a state that is whose dominant culture or presiding culture has historically been very patriarchal, to be a woman in the workplace and to navigate those dynamics that we've talked about. And you really actively, his body language was like eye rolling, sort of snorting, sort of like kind of diminishing or like dismissive, if that makes sense. And I just wonder like what you would recommend in a situation like that.
Yeah, there's a couple things. I appreciate you sharing your story. And I think the more we can give visibility and be vocal about it. So first of all, good job for speaking up. Because I don't think that happens enough. When that happens, being able to say, I was selected because of my contributions, here's what I actually have done. And I think the second thing would be going to their leader and saying, here's the response I received from this individual. I don't feel like this is part of the culture we want to create. You might want to have a conversation with them. And that should be able to do that, right? Maybe it comes from in this scenario, it doesn't sound like they responded very well, right? You would have hoped and go, oh yeah, maybe, I was incorrect there or could make adjustments, but I can tell you by you speaking up, they probably thought a moment again later on, even though their immediate reaction was like fine response, right? But I think the more you call out those lack of acceptance and minimizing others in your workplace and can have those conversations with their leader and saying, share that experience, then those conversations can happen.
Thank you so much. And just a quick follow-up question. What would you say when people, predominantly white men, have an attitude of companies are doing this now because it's the cool thing to do. They feel like they have to. It's a PR move. They want to hire people of color and they want to promote women for the look of it. And they make that point in sort of a skeptical way. I have a really hard time with that. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, how we were talking about, that is a bias, right? I think that needs to be, if you're seeing that and hearing it frequently, it should be bubbled up by the HR department and have a training. Because it's not your responsibilities to have to tackle this for the company. Hopefully that helps, yes.
Sometimes I think you can also lean into it and say, yes, I'm here because I'm trying to change that attitude.
Yeah.
And this leadership values that change more than your attitude.
I love that.
I am here, yes, I am here to change that.
Yeah.
And this has become a higher priority than whatever you seem to be bringing to the table.
Yeah. That's a great response. We need to write that one down. We caught that, right?
Yeah, it's being recorded.
Very good.
Jennifer Severance has a question. Steve also had a
Oh, I was just gonna say the other thing that you could point this person to is the company values and say, listen, I get passionate about this. This is consistent with our company values.
Mm-hmm.
They're acting in accordance to what we have all agreed to as part of our culture, that are our footholds and our handholds of who we are, how we determine success, and how we're moving forward.
Right.
Hiring like we do, our practices, those are all embodiments of our commitment to ourselves and each other that are housed in our company values.
Yeah.
So we are being consistent and we are being, we're holding ourselves accountable to the values that we've all published, that we've made very public out there to everyone. And if we don't do that, then we're not being true to ourselves, and we need to examine our culture, we need to examine our motives, we need to examine what drives us forward.
Right. Yeah, I think that's it. If it's part of your corporate culture and values, referring to that, I think that's a great reference for sure. You said there was one online as well.
Yeah. Jennifer, you're up.
Hi, thank you. So I just wanted to bring up something that came up about a decade ago, and I'm sure it's not as bad as it was then, but when we're talking about job descriptions, it's not just, it's being vigilant. So let me explain the situation. So there was a group called the 3% Conference that was about creative directors and advertising, and how only 3% of creative directors were women, were female. And I did some research at the time and found some top job descriptions and posts from major companies like Google, some of the major ad agencies. And the requirements in that job description was that you had a leadership role, creative leadership role for 10 plus years or whatever. So that and as we know, as a lot of us know, women won't apply, are less likely, I should say, to apply to a job if they don't meet those qualifications and don't check all the boxes of that. So they were already, just by the job description, probably unknowingly limiting their candidate or their applicants to mostly male, if you think about that. So it's just looking at, since then I've tried to be, if I'm, accountable or at least an influencer in creating a job description, really thinking about, is there inherently, bias in even the requirements of that job? And how can we switch that to thinking about, while still maintaining, the quality of the candidates that we're receiving?
Yes. No, that's a really good point. I ran into this as we were doing returnships with some really large enterprises. And they sent over the job descriptions for these returnships, and it was 7 to 9 years experience as a senior software developer. We just excluded everybody. And there is some education for saying, okay, be able to apply even if you don't have all the qualifications, right? Know yourself, know your experience, go for it. And at the same time, what do we really need in this job? It's really easy as a leader to say, I want everything, here's everything that my perfect candidate that would solve every issue for this role would ever need. And it's, be very clear, what is really a mandatory and what would be a nice to have. And do separate sections in your job descriptions for mandatory and then preferred, would like to. So that helps solve some of that, but I appreciate you coming, because that is something we see quite often as well. Great example. You good?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. This woman, she's amazing. Thank you. We are going to go ahead and have Steve come up as One Places Director. No.
Just a dude. I'm
We
just
have
Guy in
our
shorts.
leadership, but yeah, we'll go ahead and
Okay.
just have him round it up, and then again, thanks everybody for attending.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Just really quick, let's give Trina a huge round of applause. We're so thankful that you're here and for this opportunity that the diversity and inclusion team put this together, and it aligns so well with the culture that we're creating here and with the values that we have here at TA. And just want to echo just our support and openness and desire to continue to improve, to continue to look for opportunities where we can be better as a culture and as a company, right? I firmly believe that you attract what you put out there. And we want to be the kind of company that attracts good talent. We want to be the kind of company that attracts diverse voices, because we know that makes us smarter. We know that makes us better. It's the right thing to do as human beings. And it also just happens to be very, very good for business as well, right? That's a nice byproduct. We always say that money is the byproduct of what we really are doing here. What we're doing here is trying to create opportunity. Back when I interviewed Dave Thomas, the founder of Thomas Arts, I said, what is your why? Why did you create Thomas Arts? And he said, the reason I created Thomas Arts is to provide opportunity, is to provide a unique workplace where people can come, they can thrive, they can provide, they can educate themselves, they can grow. And so this is an embodiment of that vision that Dave had years and years ago for Thomas Arts. And we have to evolve in order to stay relevant. We have to continue to grow. We have to continue to develop. We have to bring in voices that help us become better versions of ourselves, and we have to hold ourselves accountable. And again, that just happens to be good business. It's no accident that every single year our business has been better than the year before. It's because of these types of things. It's because we want to work smarter. We want to work better with each other. We understand that our secret sauce at Thomas Arts isn't our systems, isn't our computers, isn't our building, it's the people inside. And our ability to collaborate and truly stick our mark. And we believe a good idea can come from anywhere. And that's pretty powerful. If we believe a good idea can come from anywhere, and we create an environment that takes these good ideas, lets them grow, lets them flourish, lets someone else put wings on them, let someone else put, sparkles on them. That's where these really good ideas can grow and flourish to the benefit of everybody. So thank you again for your time. Thanks for jumping online and joining us. And again, thank you to Trina for bringing this to our attention and letting us focus on this purposefully and together so that we can move forward purposefully and together as well. Thank you.